From Penn State Health, this is Ask Us Anything About Emergency Preparedness. I'm Scott Gilbert. An emergency can strike at any time, which is why it's important to have a plan to ensure that you and your family can respond quickly and effectively. In honor of National Preparedness Month, we're here today talking about the key components of such a plan with Russ Knapp. He's a fire safety supervisor at Penn State Health, Milton Hershey Medical Center, and we'll also learn a little bit about what emergency preparedness means at the region's largest academic health center. So Russ, thanks a lot for your time this afternoon. Good to have you with us. So in your role at the Hershey Medical Center, what does that job entail? Just give folks an idea of what it is you do each day.
Okay, well, we literally inspect our buildings and then train our staff when it comes to how would we respond when certain things happen. Like I said, my job's fire safety. So when we talk about where we would evacuate to, what needs do we have to take care of our patients, where would we take our patients if we had to leave our normal floors to what floors that are different floors, and making sure that everybody understands to stay calm when it happens, because we don't want to show fear that would then make maybe our patients and visitors think that we aren't really prepared to handle such events. And we do a lot of working with different departments because our needs are different for all the departments. So how do we work with the different departments, and how do we make our areas safe so that we can allow our patients and visitors to feel welcome and at home when they're in our facility?
Yeah, very important stuff. And the great thing is so much of your skill set and knowledge set really translates to what people need to do at home too, which is where I want to kind of shift now. And, before we get into any specific types of emergencies and scenarios, are there measures just in general that you recommend that people and their families take that span many different kinds of emergencies, especially those unexpected things that could come up?
Yeah, so some of the things that I would recommend is like some early notifications, like look in your community to see if your community has an emergency notification system that you can sign up to. So if something happens within your local community, that you can get advance notice for, and then look to see if they have different plans that they may also have. Like if you had to evacuate your area, is there designated spots or different directions that they would want you to take? And then also maybe go looking at how could you prepare for your home? Like if you would lose your utilities, electricity, what do you have that you could, making sure you have battery backup, your radios, flashlights, and that kind of stuff, so that you can keep well informed during these kind of events.
Yeah, and you mentioned fires, and that's something I'd like to delve a little deeper in, because that's something that especially families with children should have a plan to make sure that they're ready at home to respond if that unthinkable type of event happens. So what are some tips for people, especially like you referenced a meeting place outside the home? What are some other important things for people to remember for that particular type of emergency?
Well, if you develop a plan and then you need to practice it, and it's amazing, the kids are usually the ones pushing the parents more to practice some of these plans, because when they have fire prevention in school, they'll be told to go home and try to urge their parents to do that. And then like pick a meeting point that's outside and then refresh that with the children and the adults. And then also remember that once you are out, it's important to stay out. A lot of times the real emergency happens when somebody then realizes they forgot something and try to go back in. We'd sooner let we can't replace a life, but we can replace property. So stay out, get your family together, and then notify the fire department when they come in, hey, we're all accounted for, because that makes the job a lot easier then.
This is Ask Us Anything About Emergency Preparedness from Penn State Health. I'm Scott Gilbert, and we welcome your questions for Russ Knapp. He is a fire safety supervisor at the Milton Hershey Medical Center, but of course he's very well versed in a wide range of emergency preparedness topics. So if you have questions, concerns, comments, feel free to add those to the comment section of this Facebook post, and we'll pose those to Russ either live or even after the fact if you're watching this video on playback. Many different types of emergencies here that we're talking about. And I know we can talk about emergency preparedness in the abstract, and it sounds like we'll just be ready for stuff. But what are some of the most common scenarios? I know we talked about fires, but especially weather related or otherwise, what are some of the scenarios that you think it's most important for people here in central Pennsylvania to be ready for?
Well, in central Pennsylvania, weather seems to be one of our biggest ones because we have the ice, the snow, the flooding. You know, we've had that happen here there a couple years ago. So that's the stuff that reminds us that. And then hurricanes. So a lot of the big stuff is weather related. But we can also have some, we never thought we'd have a transportation incident that happened, back in 2006. So you never know when something happens. But if you have a basic design, you can really change the flows a little bit so that you can get through any type of emergency by just having some of the general basic stuff down together. And one of the key things is making sure you have good communications and maybe a fallback plan. Like, is if you and your family got separated, do you have a contact person that everyone can contact then instead of trying to get a hold of each other, so that they can keep the communications alive within your groups?
Yeah, so backup plans just in case maybe cell towers are compromised or something, just making sure you have backup plans for your backup plans, right?
Yes. And then maybe, making sure that you might have, especially, in our business, we're in the healthcare business, making sure you might have a small stash of medications that are needed for you and your family in a go bag that's readily available, so that you can take it, and maybe a couple bottles of water, so that if you're away from your house or you can't go back to your house, you still have the ability to take care of yourself and your family members. And we can't forget our pets too, making sure that we have an ability to take care of the pets, because we learned through Katrina that there was a lot of people that their pets were their family. So a lot of people didn't want to leave their homes because we weren't prepared to take care of pets at that time.
That's a really great point. Russ Knapp is Fire Safety Supervisor at the Milton Hershey Medical Center. We welcome your questions and comments for him. Just add those to the comment field below this Facebook post here. When we talk about weather-related situations and being ready and some of the ways you referred to, and even other situations, you're kind of hinting toward emergency kits. And I know a lot of organizations recommend that people put these together. First of all, where should I have one? Should I have one at home, in my vehicle, at work, maybe all three places?
Well, I kind of plan, I would suggest have the ability to have some of the stuff at all three locations, especially in your car. Like in the wintertime, you might want to put blankets and shovels in case you became stranded, so that you could at least maybe dig yourself out if you just slid off the road, have a blanket to keep warm. The water may freeze, but yeah, at least you have some resources there that you would have. So keeping that flashlight in your car, and then your home kit, you might want to look at your medications, what you would need, some valuable, how you would, with your documentations, like your checking account numbers. And then some of the places, really, the big thing came with some of the storms is having cash, because we might not be able to use your credit card at the time. So putting some cash in a spot that you could grab to take with you is a situation. And then also contacts, like some of your emergency contacts, like for your insurance carriers, your healthcare cards, having that readily available, because you never know, even though we're in an emergency, you never know when the next emergency might come up that you need to have that resources with you.
So there's some good basic items to put in that emergency kit. And, I think on one hand, though, it also seems like it could be overwhelming to try to think of everything that you would need for any situation. But I guess the important thing, it sounds like you're saying, is start somewhere, get the basics together, right?
Right. And then if you keep it electronically too, that you can maybe, once you do get out, and you could look into, hook up with somebody else maybe, and then you can get into your files electronically to retrieve that, scan the information into it, keep files that are readily accessible for you, will help you also. You don't maybe need to have all the paper values, but do you have a flash drive that you can have with you that would have some of that resources with you also?
Yeah, great point. There are some weather-related situations, and even others, that could result in long-term power outages. And, we've seen some of those here in central Pennsylvania, even just in the last few years. And it could even be a localized situation where just one neighborhood loses power, or it could be broad swaths of houses and areas lose it. What are some things to keep in mind for those scenarios in terms of a loss of power and staying connected and having the other things you need?
Well, having a battery operated radio system, and also, and if you do have generators, understanding where to put your generators. You know, you don't want to run the generator in your house. You want to have it far enough away from your house so that the fumes don't enter your house because that becomes then another emergency. And also understanding, like, what are your vital equipment that your generator does run, because your generator is never going to feed a whole house. Even here at the hospital, we have generators, but it only serves affected areas and certain outlets and certain tools. So we don't, we're not going to have complete service, but what are the vitals that we need to maintain? And then making sure that you test that system that you develop so that it does work when time does come.
Sure. Documents like birth certificates and insurance policies, I feel like those are documents we never need until we need them. And
right.
In some scenarios, we may need them rather quickly. What's your recommendation with regard to storing those?
Well, and that's something that maybe you could scan into a flash drive, or have a duplicate file that you could grab one of your little file boxes to take with you, because it's really going to help you if you know your policy numbers and your agent's names and phone numbers. It might help you a little bit getting faster service than if you're going to try to look things up and you just use your name. It might not be as fast a service if you can produce your policy number and who you with your carriers and stuff like that.
Sure. We have a question now from Julie. We'd like to bring that up on the screen. She's asking if we have any suggestions for parents with college students. So, it's true. That's a great question, Julie, because, what about people who are away at school and making sure your kids are staying safe?
So one of the things you might want to think about is, since they are away from school, if something would happen in that area, is there a meeting point or somebody, a friend in that area that they could hook up with, and you connect, and both of you have that connection with phone numbers, so that if you did lose your cell, but you could use a landline, and then that person might be able to have their services might be up. So emailing back and forth. So trying to just determine like hookup points, relatives that may be in the area. Can you say, hey, if something would happen and you can't get a hold of us, this is a relative that you could call, and then we can get with them also, somebody that may be close to that area. Understanding that, and then even maybe the school's alerting system, does the school have an alerting system for the students, but can the parents also get on board with that? So they might get update events through that.
Sure. For example, for Penn State College of Medicine and Hershey, we have a system called Penn State Health Alerts, and that notifies the entire community, but also, you're right, college students or College of Medicine students are certainly a part of that. So some really good advice there, especially because I know as a lot of us as parents, if we think about our kids going away to school, we want to make sure that they're safe as they do so. So, Russ, do you think COVID-19 has reframed what we as a society consider to be an emergency? Because, in a way, because of the actions being asked of the general public, the pandemic could really be seen as a months-long emergency, couldn't it?
Yes. And, before we always talked about pandemic, but it never affected us. Like it was always over in, Europe or Africa. And this here has really affected the whole world. And so we're looking at like developing what our supplies are, and how do we have it? What do we need? And not just looking at local, but how do we also interact with our community, trying to get the information out to them that we're getting, because we don't want, at one point in time, we didn't want everybody just because they were becoming ill to come to the hospital. We wanted to be able to say, here's some guidelines that you could use so that we could maintain a good, the people who really truly needed help could get it. And then trying to make sure that we were keeping our community updated as to what we were learning through the systems and what other people were developing, and we still do that. Every day we're still in touch with Department of Health from Pennsylvania. We have different departments that send us input, and then we share that with the leadership so that everybody's keeping up to date with what the current trends are going on with COVID, because it's not like one thing fits all. We have to understand that what are we doing today that was different than yesterday, and how do we keep moving forward?
It's a great point, because it's such a rapidly evolving and unprecedented situation. So there's so much we have to just kind of stay in contact about and learn as we go along, I imagine. Let's talk a little bit about Hershey Medical Center. Like I mentioned before, you're the fire safety supervisor at the Milton Hershey Medical Center, but you are obviously involved with a response to a range of different emergencies. Can you take us behind the scenes a little bit and talk about what emergency preparedness looks like at an institution of that size?
Okay, so one of the things that we deal with, because of the potential of a lot of patients coming to the hospital, is like our mass casualty incidents, working with our ER staff, our trauma staffs, developing plans. We developed the decon system and decon team here at the hospital that we train on regularly. And with the growing of our facility, we have to be able to adapt. Like right now, we're in the process of, with the new ER almost being completed, looking at, where are we going to do our decon setup to assist the ER in case they would need that setup. And also, how are we getting, if we do get a mass casualty, where are we bringing the patients in so that we can have a nice smooth flow and getting the right treatment done at the right time. Other things we prepare for is fire emergencies in the hospital. Right now, we're looking at moving into the children's hospital. So we're doing a lot of tours right now with patients, or with the staff that's going to be occupying the floors, talking about where their zones are, how would they respond, where are the fire alarm pull stations, teaching them where stuff's at before we move in, so that when we move in, we're comfortable to do our jobs. And then we also look at, what hazards do we have here? We just completed our hazard assessment for the campus, and looked at like what are our priorities and what do we need to work on, so that as a team, that was where we start looking at the pecking order. What is our number one priority and coming down? This last year, one of the things we looked at is supply chain. Before, that was really never high on our list, but getting our supplies that we need in a timely manner so that we can get them out to the staff and take care of our patients is something that the supply team is doing a real great job, but they're communicating with us if they also have problems doing that.
That's a great point. The supply chain folks, really unsung heroes, especially of the last several months, when their jobs have become so difficult, yet you would never know it from how well things have gone on the front lines throughout Penn State Health. When it comes to this drilling the response, making sure people are ready, I know you mentioned talking with people about what would you do in this scenario, but we do a range of exercises, don't we? I mean, I know this because I've staffed the public information officer function in some of those, but it's a fascinating and very necessary part of our emergency response.
Yes, we are required to do 2 drills a year, and most of the times our drills are really real life events that we end up manning our incident command center and setting up. Like we've had a mass casualty incident back in earlier this summer. And then now we're going to be moving into Children's Hospital from the other area. So we're looking at setting up, how do we perform that move as like considering it an evacuation sort of, but watching things go smoothly. Fire drills. I know some people say, oh, we do too many fire drills. But the point is so that they want everybody to be able to respond appropriately if something does happen. So we can't do that if we don't drill. And we look at, like we did some COVID back, we used to call it the Ebola team. We used to practice as if somebody would show up, how would we take care of that patient without infecting making sure that we're spreading the infection throughout the hospital. So we develop plans for that. And then we have to test the plans, because it's amazing, it looks good on paper, but then you never know until you actually start walking the process. Does this process work for us? So that's why we do drills, is to make sure what we developed will work for us in real life. And the whole thing is, we're here to take care of patients, but we don't need to create more patients by our own, exposing ourselves to things.
Exactly. Careful at every step. And yeah, that Ebola team turned into the special pathogens team, which has played a really key role in the response across Penn State Health to the COVID-19 pandemic. So to broaden things back out and take things back to where we started, and that is tips for people and their families to make sure that they're prepared. There are some great resources out there, aren't there? Because I know we threw a lot of information out there at people, but there are some agencies that have some good information, and I know we'll share some of these in the comment section as well.
Yeah, Pennsylvania Emergency Management, PEMA, and FEMA, American Red Cross, they're good places that you can go, and even to help you decide what type of kit, what are some of the basics that you want for the kit. They have good checklists that you can look at, and it goes over a lot, because like when we talked about weather emergencies, I only touched on a few of them, but when you really look at, when they talk about weather emergencies, it all really depends where you live. You'll have different type of emergencies or weather emergencies that prepare for. So they're great resources for talking about your local areas and what you can look at and how you can plan, and give you some resources. They might even, I haven't looked at it, but that might be one that for parents that have students away, I've never looked at, do they have a checklist for college, aiding you preparing for going to college? So maybe I'll look at myself.
Excellent recommendation. And of course, this is the time of year when we are officially in hurricane season. Even though summer is over up here in the Northern Hemisphere, hurricane season is still in effect. So as we wind things down here, any recommendations for people to be mindful of? Even though we don't typically suffer the direct hit from hurricanes, we do sometimes see the lingering effects of the tropical storms, right?
Yes. So one of the things I kind of, and like we do that here at the hospital, is like we get assistance from both PEMA and Dauphin County on weather announcements, and then we try to share them with our leadership here, and then we determine how we should prepare. And then we start to share that information. Is if we feel it's going to have a big impact on us, start to share that with our employees and staff. So being a little bit knowledgeable as to, looking ahead, because most of the storms that affect us, there's usually some that give us almost a 1 or 2 day advance notice. And right now, like with COVID, we learned that we have outside operations. So we want to make sure that we're protecting our staff that is on the outside. So we really are monitoring our weather. Dauphin County has been a great resource in when they get weather bulletins, they're sending them out to hospital staff so that we can share that with the leadership. And we also developed an email chain here that we're working with our outside staffs, our departments that have staffs outside, and we're forwarding that weather, working with them. Some of the other things we did was we got some weather radio. We got a weather radio and lightning detectors for when we were totally outside in a tent before we moved in the garage, so that gave them a little heads up, and it helps us prepare and monitor for situations that are coming to the area.
Fascinating stuff. You cover such a broad range of information, but you gave us some great info here in the last 20 minutes or so. Russ Knapp, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much, and pleasure talking to you.
Russ Knapp is Fire Safety Supervisor at Penn State Health, Milton S. Hershey Medical Center. And again, make sure you check out the comment field below this Facebook post for some links to some additional information about the things that we discussed today. Our thanks as well to Mike Diener, our producer. And thank you very much for watching Ask Us Anything About Emergency Preparedness from Penn State Health.